Hello everyone. Welcome to Novel Story in English. I will present the story of a love story, forced marriage. Anggia has been in the apartment belonging to her best friend Veli for 2 days. During those 2 days, Anggia was silent without speaking. Occasionally her lips trembled because of the sobs that came out. The tears that just flowed really described the woman's sadness and sadness. It hurts, it hurts, it hurts, that's what he feels. Anggia, you can tell me. Veli felt sorry for his friend's condition. Veli knows what the fate of Anggia's marriage is. Even Anggia doesn't hide anything from Veli, but Anggia has been living with him for 2 days, and for those 2 days, Anggia is only gloomy. Making Veli's heart seem to be sliced to see his best friend's condition. Vel. I can't take it anymore, life. I give up, Vel. Anggia heard her pouring out her heart along with tears that kept on flowing. Shhh, what are you talking about? Veli pulled his best friend into his arms. I'm not strong, Vel. The reason I've been strong all this time is because my parents are Vel. Now they're gone, why am I living? Anggia's lips continued to express her pain as if her life was dead after the departure of her parents. Who's? You can't say that. You're being tested, so you have to be strong. There's me. Veli cleaned the sweat that wet the corners of his best friend's face. Veli was a friend who was also able to feel what Anggia felt. For Veli, Anggia's pain is also his pain. Anggia dear, what are you really doing? You tell me. Who knows, we can find a solution together, said Veli, whose heart was constantly in the grip of curiosity about what caused his best friend to be so broken now. Vel, my parents died, and you know, Vel, that night I was almost raped, and what made my heart hurt, Vel. Anggia began to remember what happened between her and Bilmar, something that made her even more devastated. Anggia, you drink first. Veli gave a glass filled with water. So that Anggia is calmer. You take a breath, and today I beg you, you have to tell me, what made you like this? Veli wanted to quickly find a solution to his friend's problem. Therefore Veli really urges Anggia to tell what happened to his friend. Veli knows his best friend wasn't ready to say what was in his heart. But Veli could not afford to let Anggia dissolve in endless sadness. Veli could not stand seeing Anggia's suffering for years. Vel, I went to the villa with Mr. Bilmar, and you know, Vel? Me and him. Anggia didn't continue her words. Anggia was sure Veli understood what he meant. I and her? Asked Veli again, wanting Anggia to clarify his words so that he would not misunderstand. I. Anggia continued to cry quickly. Anggia hugged her best friend's body, which was still in confusion. Tisk. Veli chuckled annoyed. He started to move away from Anggia, who was hugging him. His hands gently pushed Anggia's shoulders. Veli needed an explanation. Vel. I made a mistake. Veli understood the meaning of Anggia's words. Veli quickly pulled his best friend back into his arms. For an hour, Anggia was still crying, and it really hurt Veli's heart. Anggia, you have to get up. Your life is still long, and you have to get out of this unsustainable marriage. I'm sick, Anggia, seeing your situation like this. Where was Anggia, who used to be always cheerful? No, you changed quiet after marrying Brian. That's enough, Anggia. Don't make me hate you because I can't stand to see you hurt like this. Veli kept trying to give Anggia strength. Really, Veli wanted Anggia to return to being his cheerful friend. Vel, what should I do? Asked Anggia. He looks like a fool who does not understand the direction of his life. You must rise from your slump, said Veli without giving up, encouraging Anggia. But how? asked Anggia, who kept feeling confused. If in the past he could forget his problems, if he had worn his proud white coat. But now it's all gone. Anggia, I'm curious, Who are you referring to, sir? Asked Veli. Veli was curious who was the master that Anggia meant. Because he thinks Anggia works at Vano's house and his mind is a little on Vano, that person. And Veli didn't want to guess wrong, so he had to make sure it was true. Mr. Bilmar, Anggia answered very clearly. Mr. Bilmar? Who else is he? Asked Veli. He knew everyone around Anggia. However, this is the first time Veli knows the name Bilmar. Mr. Bilmar is Mr. Vano's cousin, explained Anggia again. Bilmar, Veli seemed to think. He had heard that name, but he wasn't sure if it was a young entrepreneur who was quite famous with success at a fairly young age. Bilmar Rionda, said Anggia, clarifying her words. What? Veli, the superhuman, shrieked as if getting hot water splashed on his body. With a reflex, Veli screamed as loudly as possible. What's wrong with you? Asked Anggia, who was surprised by her friend's reaction. Anggia, sorry, don't be offended, Bilmar Rionda is a successful businessman, and I've heard Papa I worked with Mr. Bilmar's company. But for years, Papa worked with Mr. Bilmar. Only once did Anggia Papa meet him. And you can sleep with him. Wow, you're great, Anggia, said Veli, stupidly saying how lucky Anggia was to be close to Bilmar. Anggia was confused with Veli. According to her best friend, sleeping with a great businessman is luck. Veli's reaction at this time is beyond Anggia's expectations. What are you doing? Anggia said. Just let it go, Brian, go after Mr. Bilmar, that rich man, Veli teased. Veli, you're not comforting me. You're even a stove, Anggia snapped. I'm serious, Anggia, just go after Mr. Bilmar, said Veli again, raising and lowering his eyebrows. Veli did have many ways to cheer up his friend. Veli, you don't have to be crazy, Anggia still felt irritated at Veli. But it was much better because Anggia forgot her sadness a little when she was with Veli, who spoke as he pleased. Anggia, marry Brian, as well as Bilmar. I give 4 thumbs up, Veli raised his 2 feet and 2 thumbs up to Anggia. I'm so lucky, and I have a friend as crazy as you. Anggia is not sad but instead laughs at Veli's behavior, which looks funny as he wiped his tears. Well, that's how it is, isn't it delicious? Veli showed 2 teeth that looked neat and well groomed. Because seeing Anggia laugh, even though Anggia's laughter hasn't been as long as before, Veli still feels happy. Thank you, Vel, said Anggia. You're welcome, Anggia, replied Veli. Anggia has been missing for 3 days and doesn't know where he is. And during those 3 days, Brian was always grumpy. Brian is now back at Pasha's house, and he accuses Pasha of hiding Anggia. Pasha was silent. He sat on the sofa, occasionally laughing at his favorite child. Laughing at stupidity is a waste of a sincere woman. Why to regret? Asked Pasha, smiling sarcastically. Father. Where is Anggia? Brian, sure you know where Anggia is. Brian was sure Pasha would know where Anggia was. Because Pasha couldn't have been this calm when he found out that Anggia had disappeared, Brian knew very well what Pasha was like. That old man really loved Anggia. I don't know, Pasha actually knew where Anggia was from the results of the investigation by his messenger. Pasha clearly knows where Anggia is going because Pasha knows Anggia very well. Anggia has one friend, Veli. And from the first, if Anggia had a problem, she always looked for Veli and meditated. Pasha cursed the stupidity of the son who did not know about his wife. Come on. You're funny, hey. Isn't this what you want? Said Pasha, mocking the child. Tisk. Brian pulled his hair tightly. He couldn't bear Anggia's departure. Now only Brian feels regret, his habit of eating Anggia's cooking, plus every day he sees Anggia's face, even though he hates Anggia very much. But who would have thought that hate turned into longing? Longing to meet may also turn into love. Pasha could see how frustrated Brian was. Pasha also wants Brian to love Anggia, and Pasha knows what kind of household Anggia and Brian have been living in all this time. His silence does not mean he has the heart to Anggia, but because he wants to see the sincerity of a servant's son who he considers his own son. Pasha just wants Anggia to be part of his family. No matter what, he doesn't care about his selfishness. All he knows is Anggia is the person who most deserves to be side by side with his only son. You just divorce him. Pasha wanted to continue to explore how far Brian's feelings for Anggia are now. If Pasha is sure that Brian loves Anggia, then Pasha will gladly pick up Anggia for Brian. What? Divorce? Brian shook his head at his father's ridiculous remark. Ha ha ha, why? Pasha continued to chuckle at the answer of the child. Brian's father, please tell me where Anggia is. Brian promises that Brian will not be rude to him again. Brian promises to change. Well, Brian, please, Brian continued to beg, hoping his father would soften up and tell him where his wife was. Pasha was silent for a moment. He thought and considered the child's request. Pasha is sure that Brian already loves Anggia. In the past, maybe Brian would have cheered for Anggia's departure. Coupled with Pasha, who asked to divorce Anggia, he must have done it immediately. But the saying is true. Different depths of fish, different then, different now. Yes, it can be said that Brian is like a weapon, sir. He licked the spit he had thrown away. It was disgusting. Okay. As long as you promise to make him happy, said Pasha happily. He was sure that Brian was not playing games. Instantly Brian's face started to light up after hearing what his father said. Right as expected, Pasha did know where Anggia was. Where is he? Impatiently, Brian continued to ask. Follow Dad. Vel, you're not on duty, asked Anggia. Now the two of them just sat lying on the fur carpet while watching television. No, Anggia, I'm still very upset. Just accept it, Anggia tried to comfort her friend, who was heartbroken because her lover married another girl. Ting tong. I heard someone ringing the bell. Most Akram, you open Anggia. I'm lazy to meet, said Veli. Anggia quickly got up and opened the door. Anggia was also sure it was Akram, Veli's lover. Clack. Anggia opened the door. Anggia saw her in-law and husband were there. Anggia's body trembled. Her tears just flowed again. While Veli, who saw Anggia just frozen, was also curious, Veli approached Anggia. Anggia, why are you silent? Veli's words disappeared suddenly when he saw who was visiting his apartment at night like this. Why are you here? Veli snapped at Brian. Anggia ran in, not wanting to meet Brian, but Brian quickly entered, followed by Pasha. Anggia, Brian quickly pulled Anggia's arm so that she would no longer run and hide from him. Tisk, Anggia tried to push Brian's hand away. But Brian didn't want to let it go. Anggia, talk for a moment for father's sake. Pasha's voice was so full of tenderness. Pasha pulled Anggia's body and hugged Anggia. Likewise with Anggia. Anggia sobbed in the arms of her mother-in-law, who was considered her own father. Let's sit. Pasha led Anggia to sit on the sofa. Brian also approached Anggia. while Veli stood beside the sofa where his best friend was sitting and watching what will happen. Brian walked over to Anggia, with a face filled with sadness. "Anggia, we're going home," Brian asked in a trembling voice. "Going home where?" "I don't have anyone," Anggia answered sarcastically. Even Anggia threw her eyes. "Anggia, please," Brian continued to plead with Anggia. But it seems that the woman's heart has been neatly closed to Brian. "I can't," Anggia snapped. Suddenly from a distance, a middle-aged woman also stepped in. "Yes, Cindy." The woman followed after her husband and child when Pasha said he wanted to pick up Anggia. Cindy could not bear to see her child, who was always sad. She also wanted to apologize to Anggia and begged Anggia to forgive her. "Anggia," Cindy immediately rushed into Anggia's arms. Anggia was really shocked to see it all. It was beyond Anggia's expectation. Cindy came to see him? It is impossible. But that's the fact. Mother, Anggia suddenly looked confused to see who was hugging her. "Sorry hicks, Cindy continued to cry in Anggia's arms. There was a deep regret in the woman's eyes. "Anggia, Mom, please, you go home." "Yes. We all live at home, Mom and Dad." Cindy stroked Anggia's hair, wiping the sweat that was visible on the corner of his son-in-law's face. Cindy doesn't want Anggia to go, and she is afraid that Brian will go crazy if Anggia stays. It was clear that a few days ago, Anggia was gone. Brian was like a lifeless person. "Anggia, please." Brian bowed in front of Anggia and continued to plead.